The arrow cut through the damp forest air and lodged itself in the tree 3 inches from Aldric's throat. He didn't move, because it wasn't the arrow that paralyzed him. It was what came after. A sound that belonged to no animal he knew. A sound that seemed to come from every direction at once. A sound that made the birds abandon the treetops in absolute silence, as if even they knew that screaming would be too dangerous. Aldric was the best archer in Valdren. He had hunted alone for 15 years. He knew every footprint, every trail, every whisper of the forest like he knew the lines of his own hand. But that night, for the first time, he didn't know what he was hunting, or worse, what was hunting him. And it all began because of a girl no one listened to. A girl who pointed at the muddy ground in the village square and said 6 words that would change everything. The trail. You're looking at it wrong. Before we continue, comment below where you're watching from. The sun hadn't yet risen when Aldric crossed the gates of Valdren for the first time in 6 months. The village was different. Not in its buildings, the same stone houses with thatched roofs, the same tavern with the same smell of stale beer and smoked meat, the same church with the cracked bell that rang off key every morning. No, what had changed was something Aldric felt before he saw it. Fear. It hung over Valdren like an invisible fog. It was in the eyes of the women drawing water from the well before dawn, too hurried. It was in the doors locked with new bolts. It was in the silence of the children who, 6 months earlier, had run screaming through the dirt streets. Aldric tied his horse at the tavern stable and walked in. The murmurs ceased. 12 pairs of eyes turned to him. Faces he had known since childhood. Magnus, the blacksmith, fat and bearded. Father Thomas, thin as a dry branch. The widow Helena, still wearing the black shawl, eternal mourning for her husband. Everyone looked. No one smiled. Aldric, said Magnus, finally, as if the name were a stone too heavy to carry. You're back. It wasn't a greeting. It was a statement. And there was something else in that voice. Something Aldric couldn't identify. I need supplies, he replied, walking to the counter. Rope, arrows, salt. I leave at dawn. You haven't heard then? Aldric stopped, turned slowly. Heard what? The silence that followed was more eloquent than any words. The men exchanged glances. The widow Helena made the sign of the cross. Father Thomas murmured something in Latin. It was then that Magnus spoke, lowering his voice as if the walls themselves might hear. The monster, Aldric. The monster of the Black Forest. Aldric almost laughed. Almost. Because there was something in Magnus's expression, something genuine. Something he had never seen on the face of the blacksmith who once fought 3 bandits armed only with the hammer that stopped him. What monster? No one knows, whispered Helena, clutching the shawl to her chest. But 3 men have disappeared in the last month. Young Tobias, Eric the woodcutter, and a week ago, her voice faltered, little Samuel. He was 7 years old. Aldric. 7 years old. The archer closed his eyes for a moment. Samuel. He remembered the boy. Red hair, easy smile, always chasing the geese on his father's farm. Bear, said Aldric, his voice steady. Or wolves. Maybe a pack of hungry wolves coming down from the mountains. It happens every harsh winter. No. The voice came from the darkest corner of the tavern. A soft voice, almost inaudible. A voice Aldric didn't recognize. He turned. Sitting alone at a table against the wall was a girl. Not a woman yet, perhaps 17, 18 years old. Dull brown hair tied in a messy braid. Simple clothes, stained with dirt. Eyes. Aldric blinked. Her eyes were such a pale green, they seemed almost transparent, like shallow river water. And who are you? He asked. No one important, replied Magnus, making a dismissive gesture. She's the daughter of old Cedric, the pig farmer. Doesn't talk to anyone. A bit. He twirled his finger at his temple. Strange. The girl didn't react to the insult. She kept looking at Aldric with those glass eyes. It wasn't a bear, she repeated. Or wolves. Wolves leave bones. Bears leave marks. This left nothing. She paused. Nothing but the trail. What trail? But before the girl could answer, Magnus slammed his mug on the table. Enough, Elena. No one wants to hear your crazy stories. He turned to Aldric. She's always talking about trails and tracks. Says she can track anything. He snorted. A pig farmer who thinks she's a hunter. Ridiculous. The girl Elena lowered her eyes to the table, but Aldric saw something pass across her face. Not shame, not anger, something deeper, something he knew well. The loneliness of someone who knows the truth and finds no one who believes. He turned to Magnus. Show me where the boy disappeared. The place was a stretch of forest 15 minutes walk from the village. The morning sun had risen enough to bathe the trees in shades of gold and amber, but there, under the closed canopy of ancient oaks, the light barely penetrated. Aldric crouched on the ground. The earth was disturbed. Boot prints from the village men who had searched for the boy. No doubt. Branches broken in random places. Leaves trampled in every direction. A disaster. You destroyed all the evidence, he said, without looking up. We were looking for Samuel, protested Magnus. What did you want us to do? Aldric didn't answer. He continued examining the ground, the bushes, the tree trunks. Nothing, absolutely nothing to indicate what had happened there. He stood up, frustrated. There's nothing here. No trace of a large animal. No claw marks. No blood. That's what we're saying. Magnus's voice trembled. It wasn't an animal, Aldric. It was something else. Something that doesn't leave tracks. Something that, everything leaves tracks. Elena's voice made them turn. She had followed the group, walking silently behind them. Now, she stood at the edge of the clearing, her eyes fixed on the ground about 30 feet from where Aldric had been searching. What are you doing here? Growled Magnus. I told you to stay in the village. She ignored him. She walked slowly, her eyes never leaving the ground, until she stopped beside an exposed oak root. Then, with a deliberate movement, she pointed down. There. You're looking at it wrong. Aldric approached. For a moment, he saw nothing. Just dirt, leaves, the dark and twisted root. But then, when the sunlight filtered through the canopy hit the right angle, he saw it. A mark. Not on the ground. On the root itself. A mark that seemed to have been burned into the wood. No, not burned. Melted. As if something of impossible heat had touched the tree for a fraction of a second. And the mark had a shape. Aldric felt a chill climb his spine. Because the mark was a footprint. A footprint that belonged to no animal he knew. Too long to be human. Too narrow to be a bear. With 4 toes that ended in points that had pierced the wood like nails. What? His voice came out hoarse. What is this? Elena crouched beside him. I don't know, she said. Her voice low, almost reverent. But there are more. A whole path. They go into the forest. Into the Black Forest. Aldric looked at her. For the first time since he had seen her in the tavern, he truly looked at her. How did you see this? She shrugged. I look. It's the only thing I know how to do well. Look. A pause. People always look where they expect to find something. You expected footprints on the ground, so you looked at the ground. But this thing, it doesn't walk like us. It moves differently. Elena didn't answer immediately. Her eyes lost themselves in the darkness of the forest ahead. I don't know yet, but if you want to find out, she stood up. I can show you the way. Magnus stepped forward. Aldric, you can't be considering. Go back to the village, said the archer, without looking at him. Lock the gates. Don't let anyone out after sunset. But, do it. Magnus swallowed hard. Something in Aldric's tone, something cold, something dangerous, made him back down. He signaled to the other men, and within minutes, the group had disappeared among the trees toward Valdren. Aldric was left alone with Elena. Why do you want to help me? He asked. She didn't answer for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice carried something he didn't expect. Pain. Because Samuel was kind to me. Pause. He was the only one. And then, without waiting for an answer, she began walking into the Black Forest. Aldric followed. They walked for hours. The sun moved across the sky, but under the trees of the Black Forest, time seemed not to exist. The light was eternally twilight, there a bluish gray that turned every shadow into a possibility, every twisted branch into a claw about to close. Elena moved with the confidence Aldric didn't expect. She stopped every 50 meters, sometimes more, sometimes less, and always found something. A burned mark on a stone. A strange pattern on tree bark. Once, she made him lie on the ground to see a sequence of drops of something that looked like solidified amber, but which, to the touch, was ice cold. "What is this?" he asked, examining the substance. "I don't know," Elena admitted, "but it's everywhere the marks appear, as if the creature were bleeding." Aldric frowned. "A wounded creature? Or a creature that's melting?" She shuddered. "I don't know how to explain it. It's as if it wasn't made to exist in this place. As if being here hurts it." Aldric stored the information. Any detail could be important. They continued. The silence between them was different from the silence Aldric knew. The silence of solitude was empty, echoing, an abandoned room. But this silence was dense, full, as if words were there, waiting to be spoken, but neither of them knew how to begin. It was Elena who finally spoke. "Why do you live alone?" Aldric didn't slow his pace. "It's easier." "Easier than what?" He didn't answer, but Elena didn't give up. "People in the village talk about you, you know. They say you were different before, that you had friends, a family, that something happened 15 years ago." She paused. "They say that's why you became what you are, a ghost who appears now and then, takes what he needs, and disappears again. People talk too much. People talk because they need to fill the empty spaces." She turned to look at him over her shoulder. "But you, Aldric, you chose to live inside the empty space. Why?" He stopped. For a moment, he thought about simply ignoring her. That's what he always did. Ignore. Move on. Don't look back. But something in her eyes, those pale eyes that seemed to see more than they should, made him hesitate. "My daughter," he said, the words coming out like dragged stones. "She was 9 years old. She went to pick flowers at the edge of the forest. A wolf." He swallowed hard. "A wolf found her before I did." Elena said nothing. Didn't offer empty condolences. Didn't make the sign of the cross. She just waited. "I was the best archer in Valdren," Aldric continued, his voice gaining a roughness he couldn't control. "The best hunter. And I couldn't protect my own daughter. I couldn't." He closed his eyes. "I couldn't hear when she screamed." The silence stretched between them. Then Elena said, quietly, "That's why you don't believe the rumors. Because if this monster is real, if it exists, then you couldn't protect Samuel just as you couldn't protect her." Aldric opened his eyes. He looked at Elena with a new intensity. "You're very perceptive for a pig farmer, and you're very sad for a man who chose not to feel anything." Before he could respond, Elena froze. Her hand rose in the air, asking for silence. Her eyes moved slowly to the left, to a rock formation partially covered in moss. "There," she whispered. "Do you see?" Aldric followed her gaze. At first, he saw nothing. Just rock, moss, the shadow cast by the trees. But then, his blood ran cold. On the surface of the rock, there was a shape. Not a mark this time, an impression, as if something large, very large, had pressed itself against the stone with enough force to leave a permanent silhouette. And the silhouette was vaguely human, but wrong, terribly wrong. The arms were too long, the head was too large, and where there should have been a face, there was only a smooth depression, as if the creature had no features. "What is this?" Elena's voice trembled for the first time. Aldric approached the rock. He ran his fingers over the impression. It was cold, colder than the surrounding stone. And there was something else. A smell, faint, almost imperceptible, but unmistakable. "Sulfur. This isn't an animal," he said, more to himself than to Elena. "This is nothing I've ever seen. So what do we do?" Aldric turned to her. In his eyes, for the first time in years, there was something beyond the void. There was determination. "We keep following." The sun began to set. The forest, already dark, plunged into almost absolute blackness. Aldric lit a torch, the last one he carried, and they continued. Slower now, each step calculated. The marks were more frequent and larger. The creature, whatever it was, seemed to be expanding as it moved. Or perhaps it was simply revealing its true form. That's when they heard it. First, it was just a sound, a distant whisper, like wind passing through a narrow tunnel. But there was no wind. The air was completely still. The whisper grew, became a moan, a lament, a sound that seemed to come from somewhere very deep, not in the rocks or the earth, but in something older, something that existed before the stones, before the trees, before men. Elena grabbed Aldric's arm. "Don't let go of me," she whispered, and there was something in her voice that the archer had never heard from another person. "Absolute trust." He nodded. They advanced. The torch illuminated only a few meters ahead. Beyond that, there was only darkness. The sound grew, undulated, seemed to come from everywhere at once. Aldric felt his heart race not from fear, but from something more primal. The hunting instinct, the certainty that prey was near. And then the forest ended. They emerged into a clearing that shouldn't exist. A perfect circle of bare earth, without a single leaf, without a single root. As if something had burned everything that grew there, but not with fire, with absence, with void. In the center of the clearing, there was a fissure in the earth, and something was coming out of it. Aldric raised his bow in a movement so fast, he didn't realize he had made it. The arrow was knocked, the string taut, the aim aligned all in less than a second. But he didn't fire, because what was emerging from the fissure wasn't a monster, it was a child. Red hair, easy smile, eyes that glowed with the light that came from no torch. "Samuel." "Aldric," said the boy, his voice echoing impossibly. "You came to get me." Aldric didn't lower the bow. Every fiber of his body screamed that something was wrong. The boy was there, standing, apparently unharmed. But his eyes glowed with a yellowish, pulsing light, like candles about to go out. "Samuel," said Elena, stepping forward. "Samuel, are you okay?" "Elena." Aldric grabbed her arm, pulling her back. "Don't get close." "But it's him. It's Samuel." "No," Aldric's voice was steel. "It's not." The boy tilted his head to the side. The movement was wrong, too slow, too mechanical, like a puppet being manipulated by invisible strings. "Why are you afraid, Archer?" Samuel's voice had changed. It was still the voice of a child, but there was something beneath it, something ancient, something hungry. "I won't hurt you, I just want to go home." "You're not Samuel." "Yes, I am." The boy smiled, but the smile stretched too far, revealing teeth that were too numerous, too sharp. "I'm Samuel, and I'm much more." The fissure in the earth pulsed, and then, like a snake shedding its skin, the thing inside the boy began to reveal itself. The transformation was horrible. Samuel's skin stretched, tore, fell in wet pieces to the ground. Beneath it was something that was not flesh nor bone or anything that belonged to this world. It was solidified darkness. It was void with form. It was absence that, somehow impossibly, had gained presence. The creature rose. It was tall 10 feet, maybe more. Its body was a column of blackness that seemed to absorb the light from Aldric's torch rather than reflect it. It had no face, just as the impression on the rock had suggested. Only a smooth, vaguely oval surface that turned to the two humans with an almost scientific curiosity. "Fascinating," said the creature, and its voice was a chorus of whispers, thousands of voices speaking in unison. "You came to hunt me, but you don't know what I am." Aldric didn't hesitate. The arrow flew, fast, precise, deadly, the perfect shot of a master archer. The creature didn't move. The arrow passed through it, simply went through it as if passing through smoke. It fell to the ground on the other side, intact. "Primitive," said the creature. "Your sharpened sticks cannot touch me. I'm not made of your matter. I am the space between things. I am the silence between words. I am the void you spend your whole lives avoiding. What do you want?" Elena's voice trembled, but she didn't retreat. "Why are you here?" The creature turned its non-face toward her. An interesting question. It moved, gliding across the ground without walking. "I want nothing. Wanting is a disease of your species. I simply am. I have existed in the dark spaces of your world since before you had words for fear. You built your villages and your fences and your stories to keep me outside. But I never left. I just waited." "Waited for what?" "For someone who would truly look." The creature approached Elena, and Aldric placed himself between them, even knowing his body would be no obstacle. "You humans are blind. You look, but you don't see. You listen, but you don't hear. You stumble through life past the signs I leave, ignoring the trails that should make you run." A pause. "But you, girl, you're different. You see. Don't touch her, growled Aldric. Or what, Archer? The creature seemed amused. You'll kill me with your useless arrows? You couldn't even protect your own daughter. What makes you think you can protect this girl? Aldric froze. Ah, yes. The creature leaned in, its non-face inches from Aldric's face. I know everything about you. I was there that day. I was in the space between the trees when the wolf attacked. I was in the silence between her screams. I am the void you have carried inside yourself ever since. A pause. You've been feeding me for 15 years. Did you know that? Your guilt, your pain, your refusal to let anyone get close. All of it is delicious. Shut up. The truth hurts, doesn't it? The creature moved back. But don't worry, I won't kill you. You're much more useful alive. Every person you push away, every connection you refuse, every day you spend alone in the forest pretending you don't need anyone. You strengthen me. You are my private garden, Aldric. And I take very good care of my plants. It was then that Elena spoke. You're lying. The creature turned. What? You're lying, Elena repeated, and her voice had gained a firmness that hadn't been there before. You said you don't want anything, that you simply exist. But you're here, talking to us, trying to scare us, trying to hurt us with words. She took a step forward. Why? If you're so powerful, why not just kill us and be done with it? The silence that followed was different from the others. It was tense, charged. Because you can't, Elena continued. Can you, creature? You can enter our village, take our children, terrorize us, but you can't kill us directly. There are rules, limits, things that even you must follow. The creature didn't respond, but something in its posture changed, a tension that hadn't been there before. And there's more. Elena moved even closer, and Aldric saw something in her eyes that made him hold his breath. It wasn't fear, it was understanding. You're bleeding. I saw your trail. That amber substance. It's part of you, isn't it? You're dying. Every moment you spend in this world hurts you. Be silent. The creature's voice thundered, making the trees around the clearing shake. But Elena didn't back down. That's why you need us. Our fear, our pain, our loneliness. She looked at Aldric. You feed on the void we create inside ourselves. That's how you survive. That's how you exist. Aldric understood. Like sunrise after an endless night, the truth cleared in his mind. 15 years. 15 years he had fed on his own guilt. He had distanced himself from everyone. He had turned his pain into a fortress and locked himself inside it. And all that time, without knowing, he had been feeding the thing that now stood before him. Elena is right, he said, his voice gaining strength. You can't hurt us, not directly. All you can do is convince us to hurt ourselves. The creature retreated. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. Aldric took a step forward. I understand that I spent 15 years doing exactly what you wanted. Isolating myself, punishing myself, convincing myself that I didn't deserve connection, love, forgiveness. Another step. But it's over. I won't feed you anymore. You think it's that simple? The creature hissed. You think you can just decide not to feel guilt? Not to feel pain? No, Elena's voice joined Aldric's. But he can decide not to be alone with those feelings. She extended her hand and touched the archer's arm. He can decide to let someone help. The touch was simple, just fingers on fabric. But Aldric felt something he hadn't felt in 15 years. Connection. And in that moment, the creature screamed. It was a horrible sound, high-pitched, distorted, full of an agony not of this world. It writhed, shrank, began to dissolve at the edges like a scroll catching fire. This isn't over, it shrieked, its voice losing the harmony of the chorus, becoming singular, weak. You may have wounded me, but I always return. There will always be loneliness. There will always be fear. There will always be. Always. Aldric agreed. But there doesn't have to be only that. The creature looked at him one last time. And for a moment, a brief, fleeting moment, he swore he saw something in its non-face. Fear. Then it collapsed upon itself, sank into the fissure from which it had emerged, and disappeared. The silence that followed was different from all the others. It was clean, new, like the world after rain. And in the center of the clearing, where the creature had stood, there was a small body. Samuel. Elena ran to him, knelt down, touched his neck. "He's alive," she whispered, tears running down her face. "Aldric, he's alive." The archer approached. He looked at the boy, the real boy, not the shell the creature had used. He was pale, thin, clearly weakened, but he was breathing. His heart was beating. Aldric lifted him into his arms. "Let's take him home." The sun rose over Valdren. Aldric stood at the village gates, his horse loaded with the supplies he had come to get days before. The forest stretched before him, vast and mysterious as always. But this time, something was different. "Will you come back?" He turned. Elena was there, her pale eyes gleaming in the golden morning light. Behind her, the village was waking up. Samuel, still weak but alive, was surrounded by his family. The church bell was ringing, not to warn of danger, but in celebration. "I don't know," said Aldric. "I have a lot to think about." "You could think here." Elena approached. "The village needs a hunter, a protector." A pause. "And I need someone to teach me to use a bow." Aldric almost smiled. "Almost. You already know how to do the hardest thing," he said. "You know how to see. The rest is just practice. Then teach me to practice." He looked at her for a long moment. This strange girl that no one listened to. This girl who had seen what everyone else had missed. This girl who, somehow, had found a crack in the fortress he had built around himself. "Maybe," he said. "Maybe I'll come back." Elena smiled. "I'll be watching. It's the only thing I know how to do well." Aldric mounted his horse. He looked at the forest one last time. Somewhere in there, in the shadows between the trees, something ancient had retreated. But it hadn't died. It would never die completely. There would always be loneliness. There would always be fear. But there would also be this: two people in a dark clearing, choosing not to be alone. And sometimes, he thought as he guided his horse down the road, that was enough. The last image he took with him was of Elena, standing at the gates of Valdren, one hand raised in farewell, waiting, seeing.